Okay, so this is my bench area. This is where I do a lot of my work, do a lot of all the repair work, soldering, prototype testing. This is where we're going to do some work today. You can see I've got my scope up there, and the scope is hooked up to with the dB meter right below it there. And we see the power supply over there. And now this is a spectrum analyzer. This is one of my favorite tools. This is the True Audio Spectrum, real-time spectrum analyzer, and it's made by True RTA. John Murphy out of Tennessee. He's got a free version of this that you can download from certain websites. You'll find it. Just look for True RTA. But I recommend the full version, which is I believe $99. It's a 1/24th octave. That splits every octave into 24. It's like a quarter note if you're looking at a musical scale. Splitting every octave into not half notes but quarter notes, all the way up from 20 to 20K. It'll even go beyond that. That's typically your audio range, which you're interested in. In addition to that, down below, okay, I've got a box down there under the bench, which is basically, I've got a M-Audio sound card in this computer down there with a 4-channel, but it's not fully balanced and unbalanced, so I got a box above there, right, sitting on top of there, that balances and unbalances the signals and gives me, so I can look at pretty much any type of signal on this bench using the cables over on the wall that I showed you earlier. Any type of cable I've made up for just about anything. And I just need to grab a couple cables. I've got pretty much something for every occasion here, but there's just a couple that I need here for our use today. So now you can see that we have hooked up to our card. We have the in-out card hooked up, and additionally over here we're powering it up from the power supply here, plus and minus 17 volts. That's what Soundcraft runs on, and we're running down, powering the module, running signals through, looking through onto the scope. We can see we've got our nice clean sine wave there. Read our level on the dB meter, and we can look over to the spectrum analyzer and see our signal there. So this is a pretty good setup to allow us to test anything running. Any kind of signals running on the bench. In addition to the bench harness here, which hooks up to the module, which supplies us power, and also there's a couple connectors here for getting mix bus A, mix bus B, and for activating the solos and the mutes and different functions that come along that bus, if I want to activate those. And one other thing that we need to include is the fader. So without this fader, if you don't plug a fader in here, then you won't get it, the module will not pass any signal without a fader. So it's necessary to just go ahead and plug that in. And that's about it. Allows us to look up on the scope and see our signal there. If I move the fader, you can see the fader actually works. Another thing that I like to do when I'm servicing modules is I like to just mark a number on there, so I know this is channel 6. Now these modules are all interchangeable. It doesn't matter where they go in the console, but the reason I want a number on there is because I made up a list with problems that these particular modules have, and I want to make sure that I fix those problems, so I check that number against my list. And one of the most important things that I didn't mention here was that we need to have is a schematic book, technical manual, not an owner's manual, but this has all the schematics, all the parts lists, pulleys out. Because trying to repair something without schematics is like trying to find a distant place or without a road map. This is basically, I know these boards very well, and it's difficult for me to work without a schematic. So get yourself a manual. These don't come with the console. You might have to buy one, but if you're going to do any service work on your console, make sure you have one. So this is a pretty simple operation. This board, the only thing wrong with it, of this channel, is I know that the mic pre-pot is bad. I've got some parts here that I ordered from Soundcraft a while back, and hopefully they still have these in stock. They don't seem to be real good quality. The switches are pretty good. These are Alp switches, which are pretty good quality. The pots are, I don't know about these. I really can't tell from looking at them what they are. They might be Alps, but they don't say Alps on them, so I'm not sure. But anyway, we're going to replace these circuit boards. It's a phenolic circuit board, not really good quality, single-sided. But, you know, in all fairness, they really did a good job of delivering a console with the features that it has for that price point. I think they really did a good job. The circuit boards in the master section are double-sided fiberglass, so they're better boards, quality boards in the master section. But these input boards are what they are. But they work fine. It's more of a the quality doesn't affect so much the sound, with the possible exception of I always make my boards, design my boards with a ground plane on one side, and they really can't do that because it's a single-sided board, so they're probably sacrificing a little noise and crosstalk for price. But man, they really packed a lot of features into this board, this console. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove this mic pre-pot, and we're going to do that here with a Hakko 808 solder removal tool. And hopefully you have one. They're not very expensive. They're under $200. Some places you can pick them up for, I think, even $150 now. And it's the only way that you really should be removing parts. I don't use any other method than solder suction. Okay, so we're going to remove this pot right here, and let's tighten this thing up too. It's kind of loose. The heat will not transfer properly unless it's nice and tight. Okay, let's see. There's also different tip sizes on here. Let's make sure we have the right tip size on here. This pot actually has two sizes on here because it has tabs, ground tabs, that are larger that won't fit this tip. So I'm going to have to change this tip to a larger tip size. Let's do the small holes first. So I'm just going to close this in here, heat it up a little bit. And the problem with single-sided boards is sometimes the traces aren't real solid because there is no via that connects the two sides together, which kind of holds the traces on. But these come off pretty easily. So let me just change this tip real quickly. Now that I've got the small holes, let's do put the larger tip size on here. Again, the larger tip is for the ground tabs. The ground tabs that are on the edges that actually hold the pot onto the circuit board. That's mainly what they do, is hold it stable. And the pots are what hold this card into the console, so it's part of the construction too. There's nothing else holding this in to the console other than the pots. While you're going to all the trouble of making these repairs, it's always a good idea to take a look at stuff. This is a chance to really inspect all your other connections on that may be on your boards, you know, especially around the top of the board, any place where you might have cracked solder from anything stressing. Look at your connectors, look everything over. You know, you might see something, maybe, maybe not, but now's the time to fix it. If you do see something, this is the time to look at it. Just heat it up. The nice thing about single-sided boards is that nothing ever gets stuck in there, because there are no vias in the boards which connect the two sides together, so there's once you suck the solder off this side, there's really nothing else holding the part in. So there we have it. There's your mic pre-pot. Now I don't know what really fails in these. I could try cleaning them, but you know, if you go to all the trouble to remove the board, you may as well, you know, I don't want to mess around and try cleaning this pot and have to clean it again a month from now, because you know, it's too much work. So I'm just going to replace the pot and be done with it. Okay, just make sure it's in there straight. Looks pretty good. Again, we're dealing with two size pads here. Actually, I should use a different size solder. The terminals on the pot are actually quite small, but the ground tabs are large. So for those, we probably want to use a larger size solder. So I have some. This is 25 thousandths. This is 32. It's a little larger, and it helps to use the right size solder for the job. You want to be able to flow the solder quickly and not keep heat on there any longer than you need to, because you can damage the board, damage the part. Okay, so there you go. Now we've changed that pot, and that was all I really needed to do this. But while I have it out now, looking at the board, we can see the parts that have been changed. These are the Nichicon fine gold audio capacitors, several of those, and we can see some of the power supply caps were also changed. And in addition, we can see all the socketed ICs. So these were all changed. Now this one was changed. See, this one down here was changed. And basically everything in the audio path, the mic pre section, the TLO72s were changed out for Burr Brown 2134s, and the 5532s in the audio path were changed out for the LM4562s. And some of the stuff I left alone. The EQs, I left those alone, and I left the aux sections, I left those alone also. So there you have it. What's nice about having an in-out connector board, or rear connector board, whatever they call it, having this on the bench, is that allows me to connect that up to the module, which is right over here. I can hook that up to the module using the our little connector here, and we can get our signals in and out. We can power up I'm going to power up this module and run signals through it so we can actually test it on the bench. Now, looking at this, I think I've already found the problem, what was wrong with this. When I last serviced the console, I mean, it was extensive. Actually, I rebuilt the console. I replaced all of these jacks because they were using Reassembling jacks, and they were old, and especially the insert jack can be problematic. So I put in all Neotek jacks, but I didn't replace the mic jack. Okay, it's about as close as I can get it here. If I wiggle this, you'll notice there's a little bit of movement right in here. So the pad is kind of broken loose from the solder. That is actually not my handiwork because I didn't change these last time, but that is something that can happen. That is when you're wiggling the cables, pulling things in and out of the console, sometimes it stresses the actual solder joints and can break them loose, and I believe that's what's the problem. Okay, I'm going to start by removing the old solder. Get that out of the way. Then I can take a look at what we have to work with here. It looks like it's okay. We can see right now that it actually, there's no solder left on this pad at all. It came completely off. So this is problematic with single-sided circuit boards. They're lightweight. The solder, the weight of the thickness of your traces and pads is not that great, but we'll deal with it. We'll work with what we got here. Okay, what I'm going to do to repair this is I'm going to resolder these, but they're kind of broken loose from the pad, so I'm going to scrape off some of this solder mask around here. So when I resolder these back on, I'm going to have more surface area, more solder surface area. Okay, this I'm going to have to put a little piece of wire on here, so I'm going to use a little piece of bus wire. A little piece of 26 gauge bus wire. Again, this just gives us more to solder to. So you make a repair. Okay, let's solder that now. And we got to make sure that this is in here straight. It does have this little plastic tab that holds it down, so it shouldn't be a problem. And then we'll do the other two. I'll put plenty of solder, more than the original pad. This will probably happen again, but I like to keep my cables plugged into my mics and then run them into the other room, so I'm not doing, if you're doing a lot of plugging and unplugging, you're going to see a lot more of these jacks there, especially these mic jacks. They do have two screws that hold them to the console to give them some support, but they are susceptible to being broken. That should repair that problem. And we can check from our terminals to a nearby terminal just to make sure we've got a good solder connection. I have this meter in continuity mode, so you can hear the beep there. From there to there and to a ground. Okay, looks good, looking good. See these WEMA caps here? These I actually put on. These are bypass caps which bypass these input caps that I also replaced. I couldn't use the fine gold because they don't come in a high enough voltage for this, otherwise I would have used them here. You can see how much bigger they are from the original, so you can't see the originals, but they were tiny compared to this. Okay, this cap, this large cap right here is a filter for the phantom, to provide extra phantom filtering. So that is a 100 microfarad 63 volt, and these are also 100 microfarad 63 volt, and these are the KW series, which are also recommended for audio. Not quite as high grade as the fine gold, but they're much better than what was in here originally. That's just one of the mods that I've done to here, in addition to replacing these jacks. And what is this resistor over here in this wire? This is another mod here that I did, and normally when this is down, it's direct, and when it's up it's group. I believe that's what it is. It's not labeled right now. Or the other way around, whatever. But I put a mod in here, and what this is the bus outputs are balanced, but the group output is not. So what I did is I just, with a 47 ohm resistor, I created a balanced impedance, which means that even though your number 3 pin is not driven, it's normally the negative, it's not driven, but at least it sees a 47 ohm impedance on it, so which should equal the 47, oh excuse me, 47, not 47, 75 on this console. Neotek is 47. 75 on a Soundcraft, so it equals the output impedance of the op amp, and that way you get a full balanced impedance input to whatever amplifier you're feeding it to, and that way it uses the common mode rejection to cut down your noise, give you cleaner signals. That's very important. Every little bit matters. Okay. So here's all my modules. Got them back from the bench. Everything's been repaired, ready to go back in the console. Now we have to go ahead and attack this mess, put everything back together. And rule number 1 for doctors is physician do no harm. So that's kind of from a studio tech perspective, it should be the same thing. Technician, do no harm. So when we put this console back together, we want everything to work, not only everything to work properly, but we don't want anything that worked before to now not work. So when you're taking things apart, it's always a good idea to make notes if necessary where things go, put pieces of tape, this went here. I know this console well enough that I don't need to do that. Honestly, I can put things together, I know where everything goes. But if this is the first time you're doing this, take pictures, pull out your cell phone. This is really a handy device for repairing things. If I'm working on an unfamiliar piece of equipment, take some pictures. Then you can always use those later as a reference to get things back together. Make sure you get everything in the right place. Okay, so the game plan here is to put all the modules, put everything back in the console, hook everything up, but I'm not going to fasten all the screws in, button everything down until I run some signals through the modules and make sure that everything is working okay before we lay everything down. And I'm going to use make sure I look at the numbers that I put on my modules to make sure they go into the right positions. And then I can be assured that I actually fixed the problems that I had notated on my trusty notepad. And so once everything is back together again and working, then we know that we're ready to go ahead and turn this puppy on and play some music, record some sessions. Okay, while I have everything apart here, this console up, I'm going to take this opportunity just to clean things up a little bit. Don't get this opportunity very often, and generally it's a little easier to clean things when they're in this position. The dirt most of it tends to go downhill. Although a little bit will be raised into the air. So we'll just go through and we'll clean things up a little bit. From this side, we'll actually put the modules, load the modules in, and we need to hold them in place. Get them in there, alright? So make sure every one of those switches, sometimes it's easier to pop all the switches out, make sure that they're in the out position. And they tend to go into the holes a little easier. Make sure you get all the wires out of the way. Okay. I think we've got that pretty much. Now, let me grab just one nut here. and just put one nut. If I just get one of these in, it's going to hold the module in place. There's not a lot of weight on here. That way I can check and make sure that everything looks straight, all the switches are coming through the holes properly. If that looks good, I'll put a few more of these on, and then I'm going to proceed to load all the rest of the modules in. And I don't need to video that, just assume that it's a reverse order of putting them in. I'm not going to put all the knobs on and everything on until I'm satisfied that everything's working, and then I'll put all the knobs on, tighten everything down, put the cover on, and we'll drop it down. That's the plan. Back again to this side, let me check and make sure that all my switches look good, they're all coming through the holes properly, everything looks pretty good. And we'll put a couple more nuts on. Let me grab one that's not next to switches to hold everything in place. Once we get all the modules put in, then we'll dress the cables on the other side. And the cable ties that we cut, we'll have to reattach some new ones. And okay, so basically I think you get the idea. We'll just go ahead and proceed with this, and I'll be back once I get everything all loaded up, and then we'll test the console. Okay? Okay, so we've got the cover back on. I've tested everything out, I've run signals through it, so I'm happy that everything is working the way it's supposed to, and all the screws are in the bottom, so it's ready to set back down again. Again, these are the feet right here on the bottom. There's 4 feet right here, and these go into holes on the stand. So that's the only tricky part about dropping this back down and getting the holes, getting these feet to line up with those. So I'm going to slide this forward a bit, try to keep it lined up. Okay. And I'm just going to bring it down. Carefully, slowly, and then walk forward. Try to get these into the holes here. Okay. Well, I think you get the idea. If you have 2 people, this is a lot easier, but when I can do it with one, it can be done. Anyhow, I left the knobs off and these screws because they're actually easier to put on just from the top. So, but I'm satisfied everything is working now. I've run signals through everything I've worked on, everything seems to be fine. So I believe everything on this console should be A-OK, ready to go, ready to rock and roll. If you have any questions, you can always contact me on my website, which is rocketscienceaudio.com. That's rocket, as in rocket science audio, not rocket like whoosh. This is not, audio is not rocket science. I've worked for years in the aerospace industry, and I know what real rocket science is. So this is rocketscienceaudio.com. If you have any questions, contact me through the website. I'm available for consultations too if you need that. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I hope you enjoy having an analog console in your studio. This is a good one. I've had it for 18 years. I bought it new when I started working for Soundcraft, and I plan on keeping it for several more years and getting a lot of use out of it as the centerpiece of my studio. We're ready to roll there. We're ready to rock and roll. Just bring on a session. I'm ready.